About 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the CRJ left 37,000 feet pressure altitude for an initial descent. At 8:30, the Black Hawk began traveling generally southbound after maneuvering near Laytonsville, Maryland. CVR audio from the Black Hawk indicated the instructor pilot was the pilot monitoring and transmitting on the radio, and the pilot was the pilot flying. At 8:33:41, the Black Hawk crew requested helicopter route 1 to 4 to Davison Army Airfield, which the tower controller approved. At 8:38:39, the Black Hawk reached the intersection of the DC Beltway and the Potomac River near Carteret, Maryland. After briefly turning westbound, the Black Hawk turned back to the east and began descending as it picked up helicopter route 1 over the Potomac River southeast toward downtown Washington, D.C. At 8:39:10, Potomac approach cleared the crew of the CRJ for the Mount Vernon Visual Runway 1 approach. At 8:40:46, the CRJ rolled out of a left turn established on the ILS localizer for runway 1 at approximately 4,000 feet pressure altitude, 170 knots, with landing gear up and flaps extended to 20 degrees. At 8:43:06, the CRJ crew made initial contact with DCA Tower. The tower controller then asked if the crew could switch to runway 33. The CRJ crew agreed to switch to runway 33. At 8:43:48, the Black Hawk was about 1.1 nautical miles west of the Key Bridge. The pilot flying indicated they were at 300 feet. The instructor pilot indicated they were at 400 feet. Neither pilot made a comment discussing an altitude discrepancy. At this time, we don't know why there was a discrepancy between the two. That's something that the investigative team is analyzing. At 8:44:27, as the Black Hawk approached the Key Bridge, the instructor pilot indicated the Black Hawk was at 300 feet, descending to 200 feet. Between 8:44:41 and 8:44:45, the CRJ crew selected 30 degrees of flaps and then 45 degrees of flaps. At 8:44:49, the CRJ landing gear were down and locked. The aircraft was fully configured for landing about 6.2 nautical miles south of the airport. At 8:45:27, the autopilot was disconnected, and the CRJ began a shallow right turn off the runway 1 localizer at a radio altitude of approximately 1,700 feet and an airspeed of 134 knots. This occurred about 5 nautical miles south of the airport. At 8:45:30, the Black Hawk passed over the Memorial Bridge. The instructor pilot told the pilot flying that they were at 300 feet and needed to descend. The pilot flying said they would descend to 200 feet. At 8:45:58, the Black Hawk then crossed over the Washington Tidal Basin and followed the Washington Channel consistent with helicopter route 1. It is now approximately 2 minutes before the collision. At 8:46:01, a radio transmission from the tower was audible on the CRJ CVR, informing the Black Hawk that traffic just south of the Wilson Bridge was a CRJ at 1,200 feet circling to runway 33. CVR data from the Black Hawk indicated that the portion of the transmission stating the CRJ was circling may not have been received by the Black Hawk crew. We hear the word circling in ATC communications, but we do not hear the word circling on the CVR of the Black Hawk. The recorders group is evaluating this right now. At 8:46:08, the Black Hawk crew responded They had the traffic in sight and requested visual separation, which was approved by DCA Tower. At 8:46:29, the CRJ crew received a 1,000-foot automated call-out. At 8:46:47, DCA Tower cleared other jet traffic on runway 1 for immediate departure with no delay. At 8:47:27, or 32 seconds before impact, the Black Hawk passed the southern tip of Haines Point. A second later, the CRJ began a left roll to turn to final on runway 33. The CRJ was at a radio altitude of 516 feet and 133 knots. At 8:47:29, the CRJ crew received a 500-foot automated call-out. At 8:47:39, or 20 seconds before impact, a radio transmission from the tower was audible on both CVRs, asking the Black Hawk crew if the CRJ was in sight. Audible in the ATC radio transmission was a conflict alert in the background. At 8:47:40, the CRJ crew received an automated traffic advisory on the TCAS system stating traffic, traffic. TCAS is the Traffic Alert and Collision Avoidance System on the CRJ. At 8:47:42, or 17 seconds before impact, a radio transmission from the tower was audible on both CVRs, directing the Black Hawk to pass behind the CRJ. CVR data from the Black Hawk indicated that the portion of the transmission that stated "pass behind the" may not have been received by the Black Hawk crew. Transmission was stepped on by a 0.8-second mic key from the Black Hawk. The Black Hawk was keying the mic to communicate with ATC. In response, at 8:47:44, the Black Hawk crew indicated that traffic was in sight and requested visual separation, which was approved by DCA Tower. The instructor pilot then told the pilot flying they believed ATC was asking for the helicopter to move left toward the east bank of the Potomac. At 8:47:52, or 7 seconds before impact, the CRJ rolled out on final for runway 33. The CRJ was at a radio altitude of 344 feet, 143 knots. At 8:47:58, or 1 second before impact, the CRJ began to increase its pitch, reaching about 9 degrees nose up at the time of collision. FDR data show the CRJ elevators were deflected near their maximum nose-up travel. The last radio altitude recorded for the CRJ was 313 feet and was recorded 2 seconds prior to the collision. The CRJ pitch at this time was again 9 degrees nose up, and roll was 11 degrees left wing down. The CRJ was descending at 448 feet per minute. The radio altitude of the Black Hawk at the time of the collision was 278 feet and had been steady for the previous 5 seconds. The Black Hawk pitch at the time of the collision was about a ½ degree nose up with a left roll of 1.6 degrees. Now, examination of the wreckage will assist in determination of the exact angle of the collision. Now, we're confident with the radio altitude of the Black Hawk at the time of the collision that was 278 feet. But I want to caution, that does not mean that's what the Black Hawk crew was seeing on the barometric altimeters in the cockpit. We are seeing conflicting information in the data, which is why we aren't releasing altitude for the Blackhawks' entire route.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to watch more videos from Fox Illinois.